Hello, welcome to Educational Relevance, a platform for experienced educators to give proven, successful strategies in education and share those thoughts and ideas with today's leaders in the classroom and administration and how we can help students of today. My name is Brian Wright. I am currently an adjunct professor at Concordia University. I'm alongside two fine individuals today. Mark Macbeth, my partner in crime. Mark is a former administrator and a leader in educational circles around Missouri and Kansas. And today we have a guest. We have Dr. Jerry Valentine, Professor Emeritus from the University of Missouri. Jerry brings a half century of knowledge and experience to us today. And he's going to be discussing IPI, and IPI stands for Instructional Practice Inventory. And I'm going to turn this over to my partner, Mark. Mark, good morning.
Good morning. So it's quite an honor. Dr. Valentine and I go back many years into the 90s when I was a first year principal and thought I knew everything and find out I didn't know much of anything. But Dr. Valentine introduced me to the Instructional Practice Inventory. It's an opportunity to collect data and have a conversation with educators about what we're doing inside the classrooms to engage students. And with that, Dr. Valentine, how do we go about collecting data for student engagement? And then how do people go about using that data and why is that valuable?
Mark, when we built the process, and I had the opportunity to do it with one of my former doctoral students, Brian Painter, and he managed to sneak a dissertation out of our early work too, which was a win-win for him and for all of us. Brian and I put our heads together to see if we could produce a way of getting in and out of classrooms and having insight about how kids are thinking, how they're engaged. That was all part of a large, comprehensive systemic school improvement project that I directed at Mizzou that was designed to work with elementary, middle, and high schools and help them look at the big picture of everything they're doing: school culture, school climate, principal leadership, teacher leadership, curriculum instruction and assessment, how kids learn. And we worked with multiple schools around the state for many years, engaging with those schools and trying to help them refine what they were working on so that we'd have better outcomes for kids. Well, in designing that in 1995, one of the things that I thought would be really helpful would be to have a process that would allow us to understand how kids are thinking as they go through a class and to collectively look at that from a school-wide picture, because all the work we were doing on comprehensive school improvement was designed to be school-wide. We worked at first trying to get in and out of classrooms and codify student engagement strategies. Are kids involved in cooperative learning? Are they doing some kind of inquiry experience, et cetera? And we found out as we played with that for a few months that really was, we were barking up the wrong tree. That really was not detailed enough. It wasn't giving us insight. You expect to put kids in a cooperative, collaborative learning experience. You expect them to be tackling a real problem of some sort, and you don't necessarily always have higher or deeper thinking going on. So we settled in on the notion that we were going to have to fine tune this, and we built that around basically 6 strategies. 2 of those focus on higher, deeper thinking, 2 of them focus on lower order surface thinking, and 1 of them focuses on disengagement. And to make that happen, we had to figure out, how do we get in and out of a classroom with a data collector who is trained to collect the data, and get in and around the classroom and be as unobtrusive as possible without interrupting, without creating distractions, and then slip out of that classroom and codify how the majority of the kids were thinking, or how all the kids were thinking, depending on whether it was the same process or whether there were different thought processes going on in the classroom. So it took us a better part of a few months to really get the protocols down and to be able to figure out how to make that happen. But we finally did. We found out that we could train teacher leaders to do this. And we wanted to make the process a teacher-driven process, not an administrator-driven process. We wanted the teachers to be the collectors. We wanted a team of teachers to be the collectors of the data. We wanted a team of teachers to be the ones who looked at the data once they had collected it and taken that first look and decide, how do we want to engage the faculty with the data? And the same teacher leaders then were responsible for leading the faculty in the study of the data, with the whole notion that if we could look at a big profile of how our kids are thinking across the school day, which is something I thought many years earlier about, wouldn't it be nice as a principal to have that? Wouldn't it be nice as a teacher to have that? So I could look at myself and think how I fit into the impact that we're having on all the kids in the school. We built that process so that the teacher leaders would be the ones who engage their colleagues in the study of the data. Getting in and out of the classroom without being disruptive and having a real good handle on how kids are thinking meant that a data collector walking into the classroom would have to stand there at the door for just a moment and scan the room and get a big picture of how everyone's engaged, and then quickly move in around the room and among the students, sometimes leaning over and visiting with students about what they're doing and how they're thinking, sometimes simply looking at the work that they're processing, sometimes standing back of the room and letting the teacher talk to the kids and lead, as teachers do and as they do quite a bit of the time. But it took a while to figure out that process, but eventually we felt we had it nailed down to where we could have validity, accuracy of the coding process. We could have reliability, consistent accuracy within the data collector's own time spent collecting, and inter-rater reliability, which was tied to the consistency of accuracy across data collectors as multiple teachers helped to collect the data across the school. So that's basically what we did. Now we put it in the hands of the teachers and to meet with the faculty and to engage the faculty on reflective thought processes about the data profile that they were looking at. Are we comfortable with the amount of time our kids spend doing higher or deeper thinking? Are we comfortable with the amount of time our kids are spending doing lower order surface thinking? Do we really like the percent of disengagement that we have here within the classrooms across our school? Do we really like the head counts of how many kids are disengaged and how they're thinking? And bubbling up those kind of conversations after each data collection. We found we need to collect data 4 times a year. One data collection a year really didn't even move the needle in terms of growth and change. And 2 data collections started to build a vocabulary. 3 data collections moved the needle and moved it statistically significantly. We were seeing significant increases in higher, deeper thinking, significant decreases in disengagement. And yet we also knew that if we tried 4, we thought we might have something better. And we did. It moved the needle a little further. But we had schools that said, okay, if 4 are good, then let's do 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 a year, every month. Why not? But I found out when I looked at the data on that 4 data collection seems to tap out. It starts to lose its meaningfulness to the faculty when they're looking at it too often and having too much time spent on talking about it when they have other things to do. So 4 data collections a year seemed to move the needle, and 3 certainly did as well. So that's what we've been recommending to schools for some, 2.5 decades now.
Jerry, when you say 4 times a year, is that quarterly?
That's basically quarterly is what we suggest to the schools. Yeah, somewhere about around the middle of the quarter is usually the best kind of time to slip in and get the data.
How many data points are being collected in a particular day?
Depends on the size of the school, because what you'd like to have is all classrooms. We collect the data with a systematic proportionate sampling process so that the data collector starts at a point on the school map, goes down that hall, classroom, 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 turns a corner, classroom, classroom, turns a corner, classroom, classroom, turns a corner, classroom, climbs the stairs, and repeats. And you repeat that pattern, you repeat that pattern, you repeat that pattern, you repeat that pattern all day from the beginning of the school day till the end of the school day. And at the end of a school day, in an elementary school, for example, maybe a typical mid-sized elementary school of 400 or 500 students, you're going to have somewhere in the neighborhood of 120, 130 data points. In a larger school, let's say a large high school with 1,500 kids or 2,000 kids, you would have multiple data collectors collecting data, keeping distance from each other, because now you've got to have a pool rich enough to be valid. And that means you're going to need 250, 300 data points, 400 data points from a school that size. I can remember in one of the largest schools, middle schools in the country, we collected data. We had 5 or 6 data collectors working at the same time because of the nearly 3,000 students that were in that school at the time. So you've got to have a large data pool. And they were collecting 1,000 data points. But most schools, 125, 150, smaller elementary schools, marching that on up to 150, 175 to 200 or more.
We're looking at middle school, elementary, high school. Where does IPI come in at? What grade level?
We built a process in the pilot with elementary, middle, and high schools. We tested it with elementary, middle, and high schools. And we've been using it since 1996, November, when I first data collection with elementary, middle, and high schools, because that project that it came out of was a support system for 10 elementary, 10 middle, and 10 high schools. We were going to be working with those 30 schools for the next 2.5 years from my office at the university to do that comprehensive school improvement. So we found out it works across the grade level. And you get very different kinds of results too when you start thinking about engagement and disengagement and so on across those grade levels. But that's what we wanted to do, and that's what we were able to figure out how to do with validity.
Now, who are the data collectors again? I missed that one, Jerry.
Yeah, we train teacher leaders to be data collectors. Teacher leaders who are willing to put in just a little bit of time to be a part of this process. And as I tell them, when they start thinking about, do they want to do this or not, that look, if you pitch in and do this and you help your colleagues look at how kids are thinking, and you do that for a few years, you're going to look back after those few years and you're going to feel pretty good about your contribution to where that thought process moved from when you started to where that process ends up whenever you stop and look back at it longitudinally. And the longitudinal data that we have supports that as well.
Added on questions. So this is not an evaluative tool. So
No,
teachers
one
are
of the
pretty
things.
comfortable about them coming in and doing
Oh,
that.
yeah. No, we've told principals you need to know about this process, understand it very deeply, but you have to simply stay on the sidelines and support it, because it has to be a teacher-driven process. And it's not about evaluation. It's not about supervision. It's not about administrative walkthroughs. It's totally about a colleague going into your classroom, focusing on the kids, not making any kind of code about you as a teacher. This is all about the kids and how they're thinking. A teacher's name is not written down, a room number is not written down. It's an anonymous pool of data about kids thinking across the whole school day, so that you really try to take the I gotcha kind of mentality out of it. I call it the jazz it up effect. We were trying to do our best from the beginning to take the jazz it up effect out of this process, because the more we can get teachers to relax and trust that these are their data, the more we're going to get what's typically happening day by day by day in these 4 data collections each year.
Why is it valuable above and beyond assessment data? So if we're doing summative or formative type of assessments with students saying, did they learn the standard or not? Why this data in addition to that?
There are very few ways to get this kind of data, and very few people have gone after this and felt like they have done it with a level of validity. You really have to train the teachers thoroughly on how to collect good data. Once you have good data, now we get a picture of how much higher, deeper thinking is taking place in the school. Well, higher, deeper thinking is really critical to student learning. We've got decades of data from scholars who've said that as you increase higher, deeper thinking in the classroom for the kids, you increase academic success. It's a straight line relationship in almost every study that you look at, and we've been looking at them. I've been trying to read all of that literature for years. I come from a background of school leadership and preparing principals, but to me, principals have to be instructional leaders, and that means they have to understand all of this. So that's what I focus on and have my whole career. If we know that we want to increase higher, deeper thinking for the kids, then why is that so important? Well, number one, leads to more positive academic success. Number two, you look at it as a way of understanding what is expected of our students once they've been with us for years and when they go out into the workforce. The national reports that come out of the workforce tell us consistently that economically, they want certain kinds of skills from their graduates to contribute to the economy. And for example, let me cite some examples here from the National Forum and Forbes studies, surveys that have come out in the last several years. In fact, they usually do these every 4, 5, 6 years. Here are the top 8 skills in the top 10. The ability to be analytical, critical thinking, creativity, curiosity, judgment, innovative, complex problem solving, and continuous learning. All of those are linked back to higher or deeper thinking. Because when we talk about the concept of higher, deeper thinking in the Instructional Practices Inventory, the IPI, we're talking about how we help kids to be more critical, more analytical, more creative, to be better problem solvers, to be more complex thinkers, to think more deeply, more critically, more reflectively, more analytically, more creatively. I roll that off of my tongue all the time, multiple times a day. It's what our definition has been since we started, and it's what basically the general definition of higher thinking has been, whether you go back to Dewey and in the beginning of the century, whether you move to Bloom in the middle of the century, last century, whether you move to Hattie and others who have really been contributing significantly to the literature in the last in the last few decades. That's basically the essence of higher, deeper thinking. And that's what we're trying to codify with our observational processes in the classroom. How much higher, deeper thinking do we have? How do we grow it? How much disengagement do we have? How do we reduce it? We need a certain amount of lower order surface thinking to build fundamental skills and recall and practice and drive home those innate kinds of skills that are needed in education. So 3 big pictures: higher or deeper, lower order surface, disengagement. That's what the IPI provides for a faculty to study.
As you're talking about training teachers, and let's go back to the basics. Getting the right people on the bus, as they say, when you talk about Jim Collins, getting the right people on the bus. How do you get the proper teacher leaders so you can reduce the subjective
Right.
results that teachers want to provide and get something a bit more objective, what you're trying to attain with students?
We asked the school leaders to recruit or ask teacher leaders who have certain kind of qualities. Really good understanding of the teaching and learning process, respected by their peers, willing to put in a little bit of extra time, not a lot required, but just a little bit, and demonstrated leadership among the faculty, and then openness to look at and consider something like this, and lastly and finally, the ability to stand up in front of their colleagues and help them engage with some meaningful data. So to get them to the skill level that they can do that well, we're looking at basically an 8-hour workshop from 8 o'clock to 4 o'clock. We start that workshop with an overview, with background reading. We move straight into coding examples of kids in the classroom on the written paper. By lunchtime, we're finishing that process up, and by early afternoon, we're out in classrooms doing guided practice and debriefing as we walk them through how to build the skills of getting in out of that classroom. It's a lengthy process, and at the end of the day, and we also sneak in an hour also near the middle of the afternoon of how do you lead your colleagues in the study of the data, because frankly, that's one of the toughest jobs for that team of teacher leaders, to engage their colleagues meaningfully in the data. And then at the end of the day, they take a written assessment and code for about 35, 40 minutes. And I take the codes back to my office here and go through them and give them feedback about their coding skills and their coding accuracy. That's how we get those people to that. Then when we start them out for their first data collection, we recommend they pair with somebody. If the school's already using the process and they're being added to the team, we recommend they pair with a veteran data collector. If not, then 2 rookie data collectors pair together, and they work like that for the first data collection day or 2, and then they move off solo. And as soon as they move off solo, we're off and running, because now we've got that many more heads out there to get deeper, richer pools of data from each school.
Okay. And then the second question, connect the dots, as it were, between the summative evaluations, such as maybe an assessment for learning strategies that you may want to use with kids, so the kids can get part of what they're doing with the higher learning and how they can define what they're learning in the classroom. But then with the summative evaluations, such as standardized testing, and how does IPI affect positively the summative testing strategies of schools?
We've had the chance to do a lot of studies with that, including multiple longitudinal looks at the data. We've also had the chance to look at the data across multiple states. We have consistent, and we've gone to pretty sophisticated statistical treatments: hierarchical linear modeling, structural equation modeling. We're way past the notion of just simple correlations and simple regressions in terms of trying to look at all of this over the years. And we've written our papers, and we've presented them at national conferences, and we put them up on the website, et cetera. So we've got the research grounding behind that. But what we found is basically that as higher or deeper thinking increases, so too does academic success in schools. We've also found that the big tail wagging the dog for a lot of student learning is disengagement, and the amount of time that kids are disengaged and not engaged with the learning process in the classroom. And that disengagement, as it goes up, academic success goes down. And the ratio that we found over that in our studies has been about 2 to 1. For every 2% increase in disengaged learning time in a school, that school year, the school can expect to have lost 1% more of its student body failing the high stakes tests, meaning not meeting standards. So the 2 to 1 ratio, as we've called it over the years in our work with the IPI, is basically shown that you've got to address disengagement. And you also have to address higher, deeper thinking. You have to do them both at the same time. And we've also found mathematically that it takes about 4 units of higher, deeper thinking to neutralize 1 unit of disengagement. Now, all of that's that good old statistical fancy stuff that we do, but it's informative. And we see it in the real world too, when we start looking at the schools. I've had some real fun with schools by plotting their IPI longitudinal data, their statewide assessment data, and any other kinds of assessment data that they have, and doing plot lines and going up and circling. Where do you see the dip? Where do you see a growth? Why is that happening? Let's have a faculty conversation about those kinds of things past beyond just our leadership team. So it's meant to be a real hands-on tool for schools to use that puts them in the driver's seat, both in terms of collecting the data and in learning from the data.
Okay. Thank you,
Yeah,
Mark.
so the conversation today was about IPI, Instructional Practice Inventory, and how we collect data and what that data is used for. It's uniquely different data than our assessment scores. But your question, Brian, about making that correlation between using data like this and then data like student assessments is that there's a link. And so that conversation about the research that says is if we're doing higher, deeper, higher order questioning, deeper thinking, there's going to be a correlation in our assessment scores. We have to have teachers having that dialogue. Sounds like what Jerry's saying is we got to have teachers have dialogue around that data. And if they're having dialogue around that data, then they can make changes. Dr. Valentine, if people want to reach out to you to learn a little bit about this, go to ipistudentengagement.com. Would that be about right?
That's a good place to go and look at our work and look at our research and all. And then, of course, by email is the best place to get a hold of me, certainly.
Very good. And we'll provide that for everyone as well. Anything else, Brian?
I think for this session, I think we were about done. I want to say thank you, Dr. Valentine.
Pleasure.
In the meantime, I want to say thank you all. Thank both of you for your participation today on educational relevance. Have a good day now. Bye-bye.